Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Westworld Season 3, Episode 1. It's called Parce, Domine. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. We're back after a long-ass gap. This is take 2 of the opening because Connor was muted for like 5 minutes. And so, this first little chunk, we rehearsed this little first bits.
I just want to clarify, muted on Peter's end, not on my.
Oh, yes. Well, no, if it was muted on your end, I wouldn't have heard you, and it would have been really obvious.
No, I just want to make that really clear that you're to blame.
Yes. My fault. It was a technical glitch. Okay, so in a season where we're probably talking about a lot of technical glitches, as it were.
Are.
So, such a long time since season 2. I was mentioning in the first take of this opening that I after the episode, I felt like I didn't remember a lot of season 2, so I went back and watched a proper kind of in-depth recap of at least some of the heavier beats, especially towards the end of the season, and I was glad I did because there was a lot of like details and things that I was never going to remember. Exactly where we left the Man in Black was one of the things we just brought up before we had to redo this. And yes, there was a final scene where he sort of realised he was in the future and he was a host being trained to try and remember who he was and be himself. But the actual real life Man in Black of present day was on the beach on a stretcher, so he's either off the island or he's because we brought him up because we were speculating that he might be the mystery missing person from the Delos boardroom that we see Charlotte Hale go to. And the other mystery here, of course, is we don't know which host is actually inside Charlotte Hale. We know that Dolores escaped the park inside the Charlotte Hale body, but she obviously transferred to her own body. So unless we speculate that Dolores can be in more than one body at once, which I think we did bring up at the end of last season, we don't actually know if there's anything to give that credence. So at least for now, I'm going to treat this as a who is it mystery.
Yeah, if they tell us it's Dolores as well, it will be a huge surprise. I won't feel like it's come out of nowhere. But it's also probably not my first expectation.
Nah, because we know she left the park with like 5 balls, something like that. We know one's not Maeve because Maeve is still in the park as we see in the post-credit sequence, but we'll see where we go to with the mystery there. But yeah, they're teasing that mystery person, and Charlotte is very interested in opening the park soon. And you have to imagine that this is at Dolores's behest, right? Like her wanting to open the park and get everything going again, even though 100+ people just died in one of the parks. You have to imagine that this is part of Dolores's plan. She wants this. This is her agenda, is to push this forward.
Yeah, I can't see any reason why it wouldn't be. There are multiple reasons she might want it open. In terms of, it's easy to get rid of them while they're there in the long term, but also just it's again harvesting more data of minds and things to use against them all, like she's been doing in this episode. And
now they've infiltrated the acting CEO, which is Charlotte Hale, because she's a host right now. They've got access to anything that the parks produce, so that makes fair bit of sense. The only other thing we talked about in the first take, really, which we've kind of sped through what we said before, but was just about how obviously now we're in a city, we've got more of a cyberpunk show because it's not in the park anymore, so completely fresh feel. It almost feels like a sequel series as opposed to season 3 of a show. If that makes sense.
I'm really feeling the Blade Runner influence because it's in the music as well.
The synth is there. I noticed some of the main themes were coming back, but in synth form, which was nice. I dig that as well. As much as I am not super fond of Blade Runner itself because I think the story is really bland and dull, the visuals and the sounds of Blade Runner I'm a big fan of. Cyberpunk aesthetic, and with Cyberpunk 2077 coming out this year, it's definitely an in thing right now.
I mean, it's fair to say Blade Runner, in terms of the story, yeah, it's so. I'm kind of with you on that. It's one of the most influential sci-fi films of ever, in terms of the way it kind of defined this style.
It defined what a cyberpunk city is, right? That's what it defined, give or take. And obviously this one's a little more grounded in reality. It feels more like a slicker version of the world, right? Down to the fact that the phones and the apps and everything else, and drones. That's something that maybe Blade Runner didn't predict, was the idea of drones. I mean, they've got flying cars in that movie, sure, but they didn't necessarily have the idea of the drones themselves. So anyway, so let's tackle the characters one by one. The 2 characters we really follow from the show, who we know already, of course, are Dolores and Bernard. Maeve is kind of kept off the table. Man in Black is kept off the table, maybe literally, if he's the mystery man that is there via proxy at the meeting. But I think that's smart because obviously they want to spend a lot of time on Aaron Paul's character Caleb. They want to spend a lot of time introducing him and what he's going to be at the season.
I think that's important. The show's always had a good balance of not having every character in every episode and kind of mixing and matching as and when they needed. I think if you got a new character to introduce, get it in straight away so we've got more time to care.
Yeah, and I think obviously it intersects eventually with Dolores' plot by the end, which obviously makes it really important to set up now as well. But yeah, and plus character like Maeve, we're excited to see where she is, but that's fine. That's why she gets the post-credit tease, as opposed to like a full plot in episode 1.
Yeah, are we expecting those every episode now? Do you think, or is it just this first one?
I would guess just, I mean, obviously the finales have had them before, so I'd expect one in the finale, but I would expect it was just the first one, just because we didn't get her all episode, and it was to tease her, but also tease, oh, hey, look where she is. This is completely different.
Well, that's pretty cool, yeah. I mean, I'm probably going to stick around after the credits next time, just in case.
Yeah, no, I agree. But my money would be say there isn't one next week. But I mean, maybe they'll just do it if and when they feel like it. Maybe some episodes will have them and some won't, which means you have to check.
That's frustrating, but yeah.
Every time. So, yeah, so Dolores' plot. She begins the episode, we get a scene, some time has passed since they left the park. She steals money and resources from this rich dude who I didn't get the sense that he was someone who was related to anyone that we knew. This was simply just someone who'd been to the park and treated her. Well, I mean, we find out that he murdered his first wife, and so obviously the way he treated Dolores was not healthy either. So I kind of like the idea of her, like, if she's going to victimize people, she's going to go after the rich assholes who raped her or whatever in the park. Like, anyone who gave her that experience, well, their target's number 1 and 2 and
pretty
3
much.
and 4.
Because we get a little flashback of how he treated her, and it reminded me a lot of like the very first episode, back when Teddy had to come and like save her and stuff, like those bits, like some of those guys.
I wonder how many people like went to the park and did a storyline with Dolores where they did have sex with her, but didn't act like an violent asshole, who just sort of like, oh, this is romantic and we're sweet to her. Like, does she hate those people too? Or
I would assume a little bit, because she seems to just hate all humans. I mean,
because technically it is still like forced. It's still like, I mean, she's been programmed to go along with it, but like I
think there's a difference even to her where they don't, like, they're not being malicious. They're not acting like terrible people. They're doing something that they think is harmless and nice, whereas these guys are actively letting out these vicious desires, and it's a bit different.
Yeah, so it is worth mentioning, of course, that these people who are being nice are operating under the assumption that this is a toy to be used. This is a robot that is not a person with feelings.
And of course, the evil people are operating under that assumption as well.
Yeah, but they're also being
terrible. Yeah.
But this is the thing. It's the same thing that led to the Man in Black's wife's suicide, right? The idea of if they're like this in the park, then they've got this darker, like, underlying sort of personality that maybe comes out in the real world, maybe it doesn't, but the idea that it's there. So it makes sense that Dolores would target these people. But she sort of has him tied up when he wakes up and he's kind of like limping around. She uses these like sort of AR glasses for him to like get tricked into seeing like the murdered wife again. And I appreciate that this never felt once like it was trying to play it like, oh, is there something supernatural going on where he can see, like, or not even like but like, this would have been, I could really see a lot of directors taking this, and even though we know it's coming through the glasses and it's not really there, like still shooting it like it's a horror movie scene where he's like seeing a ghost around and sort of showing it from that perspective. I kind of appreciate it never did that.
It just kind of played it straight.
It just played it straight, and then the one little trick was when she was walking away and he tried to kill her with a golf club. It wasn't her, it was a fake Dolores, and then she just walked up and kicked him in the pool.
This is the first big use in the episode of simulated reality, which comes up again later with Dolores, but it does make me question a lot of the themes that we're going to be playing with this season here, and how much of this world, we talk about how, okay, we're in the real world now as opposed to Westworld. How much of it is real and how much is a simulated sheen to it?
I mean, there's the obvious like direction to go there is the idea that, okay, we're out in the real world, but technically even the real world's a fake park because everything's so covered up. There's an obvious direction.
There is. I don't think it needs to go as far as that. Borderline kind of just doing the Matrix, right? I don't think it needs to go as far.
Oh no, that's not what I mean. I just mean the idea that everything's fake. Like everyone disguises everything, so you're living a lie anyway. I mean, it's a willing lie, but it's a lie all the same.
Yeah. I'm thinking like, okay, because this city seems extremely clean right? And and stuff there's no climate control problems going on. Like there's been hinted at in the previous seasons.
Mm.
So I'm kind of wondering maybe it's a bit artificial of what we're seeing.
That's possible. It's also possible they've got a lot of droids who clean everything so well that it just looks this good. Yeah, we see various droids. I mean, and I'm saying that because with Westworld, everything that we bring up is like there's a chance that it's not, and it's the complete opposite direction. Like that's always a possibility.
Oh, absolutely.
It's worth mentioning that there's a transitional thing in this episode where it's like the communications network, like the AI that controls the communications network, like it'll like detect something in like a city. It
detects anomalies.
Yeah.
And what exactly are the anomalies is the question, I guess.
Yeah, and almost every time it leads to one of our characters, right? It leads to here's Dolores, here's so and so. Part of me was thinking, is this like the grid that Dolores is like part of, that she's hacked into and she's under control here, or is this like something that the world has that is not really sure what it's seeing, but is detecting that something is off because Dolores is operating and doing things?
I'm more inclined to lean towards the latter of those two options.
Yeah, that's fair.
I didn't get an impression that this was coming from Dolores.
That said, Dolores does have the smart connection where she is controlling a lot of devices, voice control. She's just saying, "Hey, Byte, come get me," and maybe that's relatively normal to an extent. But it feels like she can hack in and just take whatever she wants, as opposed to like other people who, okay, I'm sure they can do that with their own Byte because it's been programmed to respond to them. But it feels like she walks into a hotel and she's like, "Okay, buy me or rent me an apartment on this apartment building," or whatever, and it's like, okay, she can just do that, and she's got the funds again, and we saw how she's accumulated those funds. So, and you can just, and if you're like, well, would one guy be able to afford this? Well, it's okay, she's done this 5 times then. She's got a fortune. We let you see it 5 times.
Yeah.
We know how
and
she
also
does it.
The guy that she does it to is pretty rich.
Oh yeah, he's filthy rich, so
he probably can afford it.
So yeah, all that stuff's really cool, and we see her in a car. We have the oh yeah, this is the other thing we talked about in the first take, the dress, the magical transforming dress, where you think, oh, she's got this little sleek black dress on with like a mini skirt, but then she unclips it at the top and it just drops down, it's gold and it just flows.
It's pretty impressive.
It was very impressive. It's not often I'll comment on the dress design of things, but
yeah, we tend to not talk about costuming that much unless it's a problem. Like usually we'll notice if something sticks out, but we tend not to like compliment strong.
Not to be a stereotype, it only tends to be if it's like a superhero costume or something like that. We'll maybe start talking about the nitty gritty of costuming.
Yeah. Whereas in terms of like, because there's been a lot of strong costuming work over this whole show in terms of its period piece attire and
oh yeah.
Yeah, with everything like Shogun World, for example. There's been tons throughout the entire show, but it's never been something we've really focused on. Unless it's like I say, unless you notice something wrong with it. So this is a pretty notable exception.
Yeah. So key to make fashion interesting, just make it transform. That's all we want. If it can transform and do two different forms.
It's why men love reversible ties.
I've never owned a reversible tie. I'll have you know. Thank you very much.
I've probably got one, but I've got like 20 ties. So what do I?
Anyway, so we find out that she's dating this rich dude named Liam, who does work for a tech company. Not Delos. He's not part of Delos, but he did inherit whatever he has from his father. His father's the main guy who sort of built a lot of stuff, which begs the question. I mean, they kind of dance around ever really talking about who his father actually is. We never get a name, which I thought was notable. No,
they don't, and there's a point where she's trying to get the information out of him of who built the system, who can get in there, and we never quite get the answer. But I do wonder: is it someone we know? Is there a connection here we're supposed to be getting?
Yeah, when she's asking him, it's not about who built it, because we know who built it, but she's asking who has access to the information, because he's kind of this like front figure who only actually has access, because we introduced this thing called the Riobum, if I'm saying that right. I'll be honest, it's a really awkward word. Even though I put on the subtitles to try and catch what it was, and even when I saw it spelled out and I heard them say it like 10 times, I still couldn't quite get exactly how they're pronouncing it. But he doesn't have access to the whole thing. He has access to the sort of surface level layers. But this is a big machine, this big brain device that can compute essentially strategies, and it's doing millions, if not billions, of these strategies every minute. So it basically introduces this idea of like, is this thing technically a god? Like, have they created an artificial god because of?
Yeah, I wonder if this is the thing kind of noticing the anomalies.
Yeah, that would make sense, especially since, I mean, obviously you see the round shape of it and you think, oh, it's just the planet, that's why it's a sphere, but this thing's also spherical, so I'm wondering again visually if there's like a correlation there.
Yeah.
No, you're probably right, that's probably what it is in noticing them, and which begs the question, like, is this thing sentient, right? Does it, you know, can it become sentient, and if it is sentient, is it going to side with Dolores?
Yeah, and what does she want it for specifically? Because I don't feel like she wants a god to worship,
No,
right?
no, I don't think so either.
Is she seeing it as a threat? I don't know.
Or just simply a tool. Like, is this a tool? Can she use this? If she can get into it, can she use this to help her own fight?
Yeah.
What I thought was fascinating, actually, when she's at the party earlier on with Liam and there's this other couple just kind of talking about stuff, and I love that the you know, the Westworld comes up and the, you know, the massacre, you know, Delos, like all the shareholders got killed and stuff.
I imagine it was pretty recently in all the news and everyone's still talking about it.
Yeah, I think later on Bernard, like, he asked like when he last saw Dolores, and it was like 50 days or something like that. So it's a couple months, seemingly.
I think it was more like 90 days, but
3
still,
months.
it's like 3 months.
Yeah. So I loved like the idea of her sitting there listening to them have their opinions, because at one point it refers to like the host as F buddies or F bots or something like that, and I was watching her reaction. I was like, well, you know, does she? I mean, obviously she's putting on this play right now. She's pretending to be this woman, so this guy will date her so she can get information. But like, you know, can she be affected where something will kind of trigger a reaction where she won't be able to hold back her game face? Yeah. You know?
So far, no.
So far, no. Yeah.
You know, this was, relatively speaking, tame stuff still.
Oh yeah, this wasn't that much, but I was fascinated. Like, he's just watching her see other humans talk about this and talk about everything that, you know, that went on there. Really good stuff. And yeah, it happens a couple times where she, like, we mentioned the guy at the start, but later on the security guy, which we'll get to like him properly in a minute, but she mentions, oh, you know, you don't remember me, do you? You know, you were there for like a bachelor party or something like that. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, like, you know, I wonder how many people she encounters in the world who, especially given that she's running in these rich circles of people who could afford to go. It's not like she's, like, you know, hanging around like the working class who, you know, probably have never been to Westworld.
It does feel like a lot of the rich side have been at some point or another. Just you know, it feels like a really common destination for them. So
she's trying to get information. She sort of listens into his conversations a couple times. He's got a security guard who notably was Scottish, which I just, because obviously Delos himself was also Scottish, so the reasonable amount of Scottish representation on this show. You know,
I would say far too much.
No, good stuff. It's about time as a show that represented Scotland. Thank you very much.
No one should ever represent Scotland in anything.
A lot of Scottish people and a lack of gingers. It's a perfect combination.
Screw you.
Yeah. So eventually, though, when she does try to ask him, in fact, even before she gets to that, she probably mentioned the little action sequence where she like has to grab a bike and follow him because he's got a meeting. This is where we find out that he's not really the one in charge. There's someone higher up who Palm Clementif, if I say her name right, Palm Clementif, she works for some head honcho who's in charge, and she threatens to kill him if he doesn't go along with the the company line, as it were. So we don't know who this is. Again, we're building the mystery of who he's working for, who she's working for, and you know, Dolores sort of gets there, and you know, we have this really fancy bike that she calls in, and she makes it go away, and then later on she calls it back out again.
I'm digging the bike.
No, fun aesthetic stuff. But later on, when she has him alone and she tries to get him to talk and finally admit, and what's interesting is when she tries to get him to admit that, you know, okay, so you can't get access to it, and because she approaches this because he's stressed by these meetings and the decisions that he's having to make, and she's like, oh, why don't you tell me about it? What's going on? You know, tell me. You know, tell Lucy. I don't know what her fake name was, but she had another name.
Remember.
Yeah. And he's like, nah, but you know, if I was going to tell you, it would have predicted that I was going to tell you, and it'd already be putting a stop to it. So this thing can predict. This thing can actually, in some level, predict the future, based on algorithms, based on the probabilities.
Yeah, and you have to wonder, is she gonna just like, no, screw your predictions, I'm doing everything's gonna burn.
Yeah, I wonder if this is like one of these things where she can defy the predictions because she's not a human. Like, because she's different to everyone else, she doesn't operate and think the same way.
What I think would be really fascinating is if ultimately she thinks too much like a human, in the sense that she is self-aware, she is a person at this point, that it can predict it because of that, and it's kind of become her own weakness.
Yeah, I could see that. It's fascinating stuff. That, I mean, obviously we've not even gotten to the other plot lines that introduce their own can of worms that we're going to dive into, but I think this introduction of the Rehoboam and it's like this idea of this entity that we're going to control. One of the, Joe, I started watching a couple of years ago. I started watching Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy's previous show, Person of Interest, and I finished season 2, and I was really enjoying the show, but I sort of fell away from it for whatever, and then long enough had passed that it felt weird to go back, and I kind of wanted to start from the beginning again. But that show was about a computer that was kind of like, a big deal. Like, it was this central computer that was analysing and could see everything. And it wasn't the exact same as this, but I think it's very interesting that some of those themes are starting to creep into Westworld as well. It seems to be a theme that this pair of showrunners like to work with. So I'm curious to dive more into this stuff, and maybe this is a good excuse to go back and do Person of Interest at some point. But
like, you've got the time for that.
I don't. But I mean, how quarantines? We are quarantines. We have time. So she tries to get out of him, and just as it seems like he's about to say it, in walks the security guy. I'll get his name actually. Connells is his last name, so we'll call him Connells. The Scottish guy, he comes in and knocks her out and says, her real name, we missed it the first time, but she's, the name is actually a dead teenager from Lisbeth or something. I can't remember what he said. And he's like, okay, all right. And after a minute of shows it, because he does briefly go, no, but I know her, I trust her. And then as soon as the security guy gives him a few more details, he's like, all right, fine, what do we do then? What do we do?
To be fair, when you're shown irrefutable proof like that she has been lying, you can probably change your mind pretty quickly. Yeah,
and she had a gun in her purse. That's the other thing. She pulls out a gun and she had in her purse, which also felt fishy. So it's like, okay, so we have to take her away. He takes her away on like their fancy futuristic helicopter, and they're going to take her because she sent out a text for someone to come meet her at a location. And they're waiting there. The meter, the handler that are suspecting if she has like a spy doesn't show up. So he's like, just inject her with this, then that'll kill her. And they inject her with 2 of them. It's like, oh, she's still breathing. Like, she's not dead. Like,
what's going on? Like, keep going.
It's impossible. But then a car shows up. So they all get their guns out and they creep up slowly. And Connells like gets spooked. We don't see what it is. We don't see who it is. He gets spooked though by whatever he sees. Mm-hmm. And they sort of start firing and they run back. But obviously at this point, Dolores is sort of untied herself and she, just very, I mean, forgive the pun, but robotically like takes out everyone in the car with a gun. Very, very calculated. We've seen her do this in season 2.
The word I would have used was efficiently.
Efficiently, sure. But it's funny actually. It's funny how it reminds me, because we just did Firefly and Serenity, and it is very River-esque in a way. In the sense that she's just doing the math.
It is. I think in terms of the visual of it, it's a little more like it's. Do you know what it is? It's River from Serenity, but shot now in a post John Wick world.
Sure. Well, the way I'd put it is that this is more machine-like and efficient, as we said. River, while doing the math, because she came from like a dancing background, was more graceful. There was like an elegance to the way she did it.
Whereas this is just snapping target to target, like the shortest possible movement.
Yeah, but she drives off. I had one of my favorite little details here actually is when she runs over like one of the bad guys like is behind the car, and when she runs over him, there's like a security camera like monitor in the car where you can see like the sort of the back of the like it's like it's pointing out the back of the instead of a rear view mirror there's like the camera pointing out there. But when she bumps over the guy, she drives over them, the camera kind of, I don't know, it was a really nice visual.
yeah there's a bit of her beating up a couple of guys that you just watch on the camera. That's pretty nice. Yeah
because the camera just stays inside the car, so we see if she's not in the front of the car we see it on the monitor, or should we see it out the front of the car, but we don't see. It's really well done and how it's shot. We get a bit of a chase, but she chases after Connells, and we have a shootout. the shootouts in Westworld aren't necessarily always been its strong suit in terms of the filmmaking. It's maybe where some of it's not the slickest. Obviously the stuff in the car was really good with her, but when it's just her like ducking for cover and shooting back, that it's a bit just generic and there's not really much style to it. However, after that, there is like a really great moment where he peeks around one side of the tree and doesn't see her. He peeks around the other side of the tree and she's just there and just
Yeah, I actually will say I thought the gunfighting was a little bit more exciting here than it has been in previous seasons.
Here's how I'd put it. I think when it's doing something particularly stylistic, or when it's leaning into almost the horror movie side of it, where she's a Terminator and not like a person in a gunfight, it tends to like really work. But when they actually have to kind of treat it for a little bit as just a gunfight, it tends to just kind of slow down, or not slow down, but
I get what you're saying. I think I preferred it here with her just having like a regular gun as opposed to using more stylistically appropriate weapons that we had, in previous seasons. Like we had riding around with like the rifles and stuff like that.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, no, her having more high-tech stuff is definitely a benefit, for sure. Yeah. And of course, after this, she's going to take care of the body. Obviously, the guy that was in the car was actually Connell's. They've got a Connell's host with who's inside him. We don't know, but
it's again infiltration into a different company at this point.
Mm-hmm. Someone who can maybe get close to what's going on with this Rehoboam like brain.
Yeah.
So maybe a quantum computer. Maybe I don't know if it is technically a quantum computer, but that's maybe my best description right now.
It'll do for now. Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, we get to that moment. Actually, the final part of her is when she intersects with. Obviously, we saw Aaron Paul briefly, sort of before some of the shootout stuff, because his plot kind of intersected. But then he runs back into her under the tunnel. It's that great moment from the first trailer. Where she kind of stumbles out after, because she's been shot. She's been shot in this fight, and she's kind of stumbling down this tunnel, and he sees her, and so this is where I think we transition neatly into his plot, and then build back up to this moment and sort of see what it means to him, because.
Sure.
So we have this repetition element to him where we see him wake up multiple times, and he's a vet. He's back from combat, and we hear him talking to Francis, right? And Francis is someone who was a vet with him, someone who was on duty with him. And in the stuff we're seeing, he keeps ignoring the call. Every time we see him get the call from Francis, he hangs up. He doesn't accept the call. But we're hearing the call that obviously eventually takes place at some point. We're hearing parts of the call from later in the episode. And we find out that this is part of a program. And I actually kind of called that the Francis wasn't real long before we got there, just because the way the therapist, when he was talking to the therapist, said, "Oh, it's the program. Have you talked to him?" I can't say for sure if the program works, but I know if you don't try, it'll definitely not succeed. It was just the way he talked about it. I kind of got, okay, this Francis on the phone is not a real Francis.
But it's again another simulation.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. More simulations, and there's some really interesting stuff.
Yeah, even just like you say, we see this daily grind at the start, this repetition. It's very similar to how we were introduced to Dolores in the first season, with that repetition of just her day.
But except in this case, with at least at face value a human, although there was maybe some debating to be had, actually, given a couple of things that happened in the episode. Mm-hmm. But so we see him go to work. He works in construction. He works with a droid, but he's struggling for money. His mother's sick, and she's in a hospital bed, and there's a great moment here, and this is one of those lines where they know we're going to obsess over it as to what it means. Like, is it just literally she has dementia and she's saying, "You're not my son," because she's just, she's got dementia and she doesn't...
Face value, she's just ill and doesn't recognize him.
Or is he technically, did he die in combat and he's this is now a host body, and that's why she's saying, "You're not my son"?
It's possible, yeah. Or some sort of implanted memories potentially as well.
Because we know that the whole point of Westworld for Delos really was to take all the minds of people so that they could theoretically put rich people into new host bodies so they could live forever, right? That was kind of the target. And it kind of makes some sense to me for some of the experimentation perhaps to be on kind of vets who are like, let's be honest, and the grand scheme of history are often mistreated and used as guinea pigs and things like that. It makes me think of Esmail's show, Homecoming. Yeah, it makes me think of that a little bit.
I know you again. I think it's really easy to do it because there's an expectation almost for vets when they get back to not be the same, not to be just perfectly right, with good reason. But it means that if something does go wrong and they're not quite how they were supposed to be, it's really easy for them to just explain it away. You know, people aren't going to question why is this person so different because, well, they went through some stuff and not necessarily they died and we replaced them and they're just not quite right.
Yeah, the other line as well later when he's like sort of like measuring up to like the guard when he's dropping off the delivery, right at the Dolores section. He says that he's had a gun to his face before, and then he says, "Well, have you ever been shot in the head before?" And he's like, "Yeah, someone beat you to that too." So he knows he's been shot in the head, right? So if the idea being that if that killed him and he came back or something, like presumably like he might be self-aware of it, but at the same time because he gets frustrated throughout because at one point because he's up for like a job, we don't see him do a job interview, but we know that he's up for a job, and he gets a call from this company. And the person's like, "Oh, you had a good showing, but unfortunately we have nothing for you." And he tries to talk to them and say, "Hey, like, what can I do to make myself a better candidate?" Blah blah blah. And then he realizes the responses he's getting are kind of canned and not like a person. He's like, "Are you a human?" Like he actually says that, and it obviously just says something robotic back to him. He's like, "Thanks Forget anyway." Yeah, bye.
I think if he did die, I think it's more likely they just told him he survived somehow through some medical miracle rather than you died and we reimplanted you. I don't think he's self-aware in that sense.
His dialogue would certainly indicate that, but it is worth knowing he does know he was shot in the head at the very least.
It is, yeah. Also, we were talking about the job interview aspect. I thought it was very interesting that it kind of seems almost proto-Gattaca style, where people are assigned things that there's scores and they're like, okay, we kind of know what industry and what sort of job you'll do in. And if not, tough.
Yeah. It sounds like he's being kind of essentially profiled based on the fact that he's a vet or whatever, maybe a medical condition. So other interesting bits here. So let's say that he's a host, right? Because one of the things he says when he eventually answers the phone, after he's dropped off the package, he eventually answers the call from Francis. And I'm skipping over some of his plot. We'll go back and talk about that. But he answers the call from Francis. We hear at the end of it, and ultimately says that he wants to cancel this. He doesn't want to talk to him anymore because he needs to find someone real. And this is right before he finds Dolores. So there's a great kind of irony to this where he says he needs to find someone real, and then he finds Dolores, and the way he holds her. I mean, I'm not saying he's fallen in love like immediately or anything, but like it does kind of feel like it's this big meeting, right? It's this big meeting of two people who are going to be, together in plot at the very least for the rest of the season. And I think this is one of those wonderful things that Westworld does where, okay, taking it complete face value, there's almost the ironic joke of, hey, he wants to find someone real. He's going to think he has, but it's Dolores, she's a host. But there's this beautiful symmetry to it where if he is a host that's been put into, or he is a person who's been then put into a host without realizing it, so he doesn't even realize that he is in some way fake, that it brings this question again to the forefront, which is something we've been talking about since the start of the show, is like, well, what does real even mean? Like, once a host has self-awareness, once it has hopes and fears, isn't it not just as real as a human being? Like, at what point does that make a difference? So this idea that he has not necessarily like a prejudice, because it's not like he's not like anti-machine or simulation or anything like that, but he clearly seems to be tired of like not having real life around him. He's tired of not having real connections. So
I think
there's a beautiful idea of like him forming a real connection with Dolores because of all the factors for both of them in play.
Yeah, I think that was the key thing here. It's the connection, the humanity involved. Because I think Dolores, as much as she wouldn't want to admit it, does have humanity in the context that we're kind of discussing here. And in that she's got free will, she can make her own choices. It's not just an AI saying things that it's kind of programmed to. And that's the key difference between the two interactions that really kind of summed it up. Well, the one we talked about, with the job interview, that kind of callback, and then the final bit with Francis on the phone where it says something, and it's like, no, that's not what Francis would have said, because Francis said the opposite, and this just isn't going to work, because it just doesn't quite understand the actual person, whereas Dolores is, for all intents and purposes, a person. She has that humanity. There is chance for an actual connection there between them, regardless of whether or not she is real in the other sense.
Yeah, and I would say she is. Like, I don't think it's a surprise that I think both of us from the start would say no, she is. Like, once an android has achieved self-awareness, yes, they should have rights. They should not be mistreated, so on and so on.
It's kind of the point of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to know what the Venn diagram is of people who are racist who would disagree with that statement. versus, but like, is it, I want to know what the short percentage is of people who are not racist who would disagree that a robot, once it has self-awareness and like fears and hopes and stuff, like, should it then be considered as a life form? Like,
I think that
it has to be narrow.
I think you're going to have a bit of an overlap. I think you'll get a lot bigger overlap with people who are racist and then who think the opposite, like the other way around.
Oh, you think there's going to be a lot of people who are racist, but who will see these people as life?
Yeah, I think weirdly you would.
That's odd, but sure.
I know.
Because in my head, I'm thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, but the reason why we think that is because of empathy. And it's like, you know, once it's a life form, like, yeah, empathy is kind of what reigns supreme. And what a racist or someone, or even beyond racism, any type of like prejudice in that sense, you know, whether it's sexism, whatever, like, it tends to be a lack of empathy. Not always, sometimes there's other factors, but that's a big part of it.
No, that's true.
So, I don't know, it's something to think about. So the stuff we've glossed over with him, though, is that he keeps turning to crime because he can't afford to keep his mother's like medical costs down, and he has an app which he can take jobs.
Crime.
Uber for crime. I've heard people online joke about this being exactly what you use in Grand Theft Auto these days. Apparently, this is how it works.
Couldn't tell you the last time I played Grand Theft Auto, so
maybe they mean the online version. I don't know, but this is apparently
been like a decade at least for me. So,
but we see him meet up with Lena Waithe. They steal from an ATM, and then he helps like deal with some like addict who's like, or some guy who's like OD'd on some experimental drug, and he's going absolutely nuts.
Yeah, and he keeps saying he doesn't do personals as well, right? Was it the right word? I think it was personals.
Yeah, it's personals. Yeah.
Yeah, which again, so he has this line that he's like, no, that's not what I'm comfortable doing, but I'm sure that will be broken down soon entirely.
Oh yeah, for sure. So no, that stuff obviously it helped his character to show how hard things were on him. But I think more than anything, this really gives us a sense of what the world's like seeing these different types of crime, seeing what the drugs are like, seeing how crime operates, how impersonal it is, where they just kind of like meet up and never. Well, I mean, they see each other again maybe if they happen to be on the same job again, but it's not like, because he's met Lena Waithe's character before, but it's not someone that he knows personally or deeply.
No, they did a job before at some point.
Yeah. I was also reminded a little bit of that Black Mirror episode, the voting one, the app, because the rating, you know. Because they're talking about, because she was talking about how you have to get your status up so you'll get the better jobs and the bigger jobs and the, you know, this ATM stuff's for the peasants.
Just like, fine, this will do me.
Yeah, he wants to be under the radar essentially, and maybe that's just a case of like, if I get caught, it's less crime time.
Could be, although we have no idea what the scale of punishment is for these sorts of things.
Oh, no idea. That's just basically speculation, just based on the real world.
Yeah,
if nothing else. So that stuff was really fascinating. His character's immediately intriguing to me, and I think the big potential here for this is the idea that if Dolores is still hellbent, and obviously she did gain some empathy back at the end of the second season, where she chose not to just like murder all the hosts. She chose to send them to their happy place because that was their choice, right? That was kind of her big kind of, I don't want to say heroic moment, but like, you know, I won't be completely evil. I'll give them, if that's the happy ending they want, if that's what Teddy wants, then they can have that. But like, I wonder if she's a hell bent on like, you know, taking on humanity, like, as a connection to someone like Caleb, which is Aaron Paul's character. I've just been calling him Aaron Paul this whole time, but he's Caleb. Call me Caleb. And I said that because that's Nathan Fillion's character on the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He played an evil priest in season 7 called Caleb. So easy. It's so easy. So, but like, as a connection to him, is that the sort of thing that convinces her that humanity is not like worth not killing? There's humanity worth saving. Is that? I think
it's possible that that's where we could go, and maybe she realizes that not all humanity is the evil, terrible people she witnessed at Westworld. They were the rich elite scumbags. I mean, and maybe there are these poor, downtrodden, kind of desperate folk that are more like her than she realized. Yeah,
she could realize that there's actually entire large majorities of the population who are also kind of treated as nothing. Maybe not the exact same way that she was, but they're treated as if they're expendable. They're treated like a number on a spreadsheet or whatever. Yeah. And I also like the idea of mirroring this, where he's kind of like, okay, the man in black Like before she kind of became self-aware, she kind of believed in the humanity of William, right? And then his transition to Man in Black and what he was like later on is almost kind of what taught her how awful people were in a lot of ways, right? Not just him, but that was a big part of it. And I almost like the idea of him being this kind of mirror image where now Caleb is going to be the opposite end of that, where he's going to try and undo that damage, or even not intentionally, but he by his existing and by being in our life will undo that damage, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation of what this relationship might be. Could be completely thrown all this out the window by next episode where we see more of them together.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're going on what we've seen so far, but the fact that there's so many potential ideas to take from this, or so many directions to take from it that are exciting us off the bat, is a sign of a good layered set of characters and storytelling. And some people criticize Westworld for being too mystery box, but honestly, like, maybe season 2 went a little too far with it, but I watching this, I feel like there's so many good ideas running together and playing off each other that I don't.
Honestly, this season so far feels relatively straightforward.
So far,
and I'm not saying there's no mysteries. Like, okay, there's some identities being hidden, of course, and who's in what host bodies and such. But I don't feel like the whole thing's just a scam. I feel like there is a narrative and character development going on already. And establishing things in this episode that it feels like, okay, I can see where an arc can go for multiple characters already. I can see following that, and ultimately that makes the mystery kind of, if second place in terms of whatever it is.
Yeah, we care about what's going on.
Great. If it's exciting, that's good. But as long as the character drama kind of excels in the way it has been, that's kind of enough.
Yeah, we care about what's going on. We care about what happens to the characters. So if we're already in for that, then like we're in. Like, it doesn't matter if there is some big mystery to unravel. Although there is certainly some details. Obviously, we're talking about mystery characters here or there. But so. Yeah, that was Caleb. That was Caleb's side of things. We have to then talk a little bit about Bernard, who has been blamed for everything. He's been blamed for the massacre, and he's got a different name now. He's under an alias again. I think it was like Armand. I chuckled at it because it was very close to Arnold when I saw it.
Right.
It was a very similar name. It was like Armand or something like that. But he's working elsewhere, around somewhere else on the planet. I didn't quite catch what country it was, but he's trying to keep a low profile. What I thought was really interesting, though, was when he's on his own and he's doing that host diagnostic thing to himself, where he's asking himself if anyone's like hacked him or talked to him, but he's not aware. It's funny. Like, it's almost like a Mr. Robot thing where he's like talking to his alternate personality. Hey, has anyone talked to you?
It is, and he has a little like button clicker
that
kind of activates the other personality.
Which he actually, because these guys kind of realize who he is and try to pick a fight with him. And once he realizes he can't talk his way out of it, he says to like his other self, he's like, "Don't hurt them too bad." And he clicks his button and he goes into like host Terminator mode. Very interesting.
Yeah. It is, and I think what's going to be fascinating is at some point does the host kind of mode not want to let him, Bernard back out, because it has to make that choice to click the button, right?
Maybe there's nothing in this yet that indicates to me that the other is like a separate personality that actually wants control. Like, so far, there's nothing to give me that sense.
Not yet, but just the it's setting up that, okay, no, there's this button that we need to click to change between them, and I can't help but feel there is a way to go down this where it doesn't want to click to change back to relinquish that control.
I mean, if it happens, then fair enough. But right now, I don't think that's happening. I'm not getting that vibe. But we'll see. But the big thing, though, is that he is actually chartering a boat. I'm going to reference Lost here because we have to go back. That's all I could think about during this scene was we have to go back. So he has to go back. He's going back to Westworld. He's getting a boat. And it seems like he's going back to Westworld because he is terrified of what Dolores is doing. He can't let her succeed with her plan. And the only person he believes can stop her is Maeve. I mean, he doesn't say that. He doesn't say her name. But it's clearly Maeve that he's talking about, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's no one else he could be.
And we see Maeve in the post-credit scene, of course. Honestly, we saw this almost the entire scene in the first trailer, so it wasn't like a surprise.
I didn't watch any of the trailers, so this was a huge thing for me.
Oh yeah, so she's in like a new section of the park or another park. I mean, given that Bernard's going to where he thinks the park is, I assume it's the same island.
I would, because Shogun World was kind of the same island, right?
Yeah, so was the Raj one as well.
Yeah.
So she's in Nazi Germany land. I guess the whole appeal is that you're in World War II, you can kill Nazis. I guess that's the whole point of it. But
I imagine some people choose to be Nazis.
And some people probably choose to be Nazis, which is a whole kind of psychological worms that we can get into at a later point. I mean,
that kind of falls right in line with some of the terrible people in Westworld, though, doesn't it?
No, it does. It makes complete sense. So we have her there, seemingly in a new loop. And, will she be reawoken? I mean, obviously she will be, but, like, will she choose to be reawoken? Is she actually aware the whole time and is just playing along anyway?
I got the impression here that she was aware, because she woke up and, she looks confused about where she is. Like, to her, maybe that she's experiencing this for the first time, but she seems aware of who she is as Maeve. To me, that was my impression. But, like, she's just woken up and she's, where am I? What's going on? And, and she goes, because I didn't know where this was going. I'm seeing the set dressing and the costuming going, okay, I'm getting a sense. And then it goes out and there's the German guy, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then, she opens the windows and sees it. And it felt like she was seeing that for the first time as well, to me.
Sure. Yeah, but that could also be how she wakes up every time.
It could be, but it felt like, the awareness of it, like the confusion of what was going on, made it feel aware.
Don't get me wrong. Like I would lean heavily as well that she could be completely aware, or that she's in like a new loop, and this is the first time she's going through it. Just because, because Maeve had like robot superpowers. She could like take control of devices and other hosts like that were on the same network. Which begs the question: what happens when Maeve gets towards this Rehoboam?
Yeah, and what happens when she marches on Maeve with an army of Nazis?
Wait, what?
Did I say Maeve? I meant Dolores.
Look, given that Maeve is clearly the more heroic one of the two, at least in current optics, I feel like having her have the army of Nazis would ruin that a little bit. So let's not go down that path.
But that's why it would be so fascinating.
No.
That's just like this is what was available.
She's not bringing an army of Nazis with her, right? She's going to hopefully leave with Bernard at some point and come swinging. But this is the funny thing is we all last season I remember talking about how this battle of ideology between Maeve and Dolores, who have both become self-aware in different ways, who have different sets of abilities and different agendas, and we were waiting with bated breath for the kind of the showdown, not necessarily in a physical violence sense, but in like a recently we were doing Doomsday Clock in the Comics podcast. It was like Superman versus Dr. Manhattan, not because we want to see them punch each other, because of how Superman's going to talk him out of it. Like, how is he going to appeal to him? And I feel like that's kind of the excitement here. Is like I'm still fascinated and excited for Dolores versus Maeve, and like not just in a case of like who wins, because I don't necessarily see an outright winner. More how we come to some kind of conclusion where one of them doesn't commit genocide.
I think the key word is how we come to some sort of compromise.
Yes. Between
the two extreme. Well, I say extremes. Maeve is immediately more sympathetic, but she's on an extreme other end. I think it's fair to say.
I mean, it could be less of a compromise and more that they both kind of like form a new ideology once they've understood each other, as opposed to like.
Yeah.
As opposed to a compromise where they literally go, well, I won't kill all the people, but I'm still doing this, and like, okay, handshake.
I didn't mean quite that sense of compromise. More like you say, the ideology of, okay, well, let's meet in the middle and kind of sort something out, rather than just, it's still going to be a murderous bitch.
I mean, that's assuming it has some kind of reasonable ending and not a complete tragedy where we're all just screwed, which is also possible.
I mean, for all we know, the show could end with Dolores wiping out humanity and her winning. And I mean, I think unlikely, but it's not impossible.
But this isn't the final season, so I mean, we've got some time to go before that.
Yeah.
So and enjoy the season, because obviously a lot of other shows are being delayed right now, and their production's being halted because of the thing that's going on in the world, and
even shows with a air date that was supposed to be within the next couple of weeks are being like, actually, maybe not.
Yeah, well, it was mid-April, if it's a little bit far ago.
That's like the next couple of weeks.
That's like that. Couples 2. It's not in the next 2 weeks. It was like April 17th or something like that.
It's the next couple of weeks.
It was a month. Whatever. It's literally a month.
Whatever. I'm ballparking.
Literally a month. All right. Is there anything we have glossed over in terms of main plot lines? I don't think so. But I mean, Westworld's so packed with dense little details. I was obsessed with like missing things, and there probably is little things there. By all means, let us know in the comments if there's any little details you think might be important going forward. That kind of stuff. We'd love to see them. It's fun to have the show back. It's fun to have these conversations. I mean, we're hitting 50 minutes here, and that was with a kind of like a speed round of the first 5 minutes because we'd already done it in a longer 10-minute form in take one. Yeah. So, but hey, that is the review of season 3, episode 1 of Westworld. We'll be back week to week with more reviews of this. So let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Give us your theories. Like and subscribe. Ding the bell on YouTube for notifications. If you want to support the show, you can do that by rating the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars and a review. Helps us out a lot if you do that. Obviously, financially, you can head over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support us for as little as $1 per month, and that will get you some bonus content. $5 gets you early access to some stuff and some voting rights. But go and have a look and see if you want to help keep all the content coming. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. Check out other stuff. We have a lot more other sci-fi shows, actually. Me and Tara are reviewing Picard right now. And, of course, what's the other one that's going on right now?
In terms of sci-fi?
I'm sure there's another sci-fi show that I was recommending. I'm sure there was devs.
I know you were recommending
devs.
How did we not get that as well with one of the big themes in this?
I don't know, but Devs is on. We're reviewing that, so check out Devs reviews. So yes, also there's a sci-fi movie podcast called The Atomic Cinema Experiment. If you want to hear me and Tara talk about sci-fi movies every week, you can go check out that too. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?